Gathering data on your fleet has never been easier. Real-time tracking from Quartix improves your productivity, cuts fuel consumption, and minimizes vehicle wear and tear. Quartix improves driving styles and safety, reduces paperwork, produces timesheets, and validates hours worked, all backed by award-winning customer service to give you the complete picture. Every driver, every vehicle, every journey. Quartix, more than just vehicle tracking.
Veriforce is proud to announce the latest version of our Safeland USA accredited course called Basic Orientation 7.0. This is our flagship course that has been taken by over 1.6 million students nationwide. The newest version of this course is shorter than the last version, with condensed training and updated multimedia, but it still includes the same topics as previous courses. As always, the Safeland orientation remains with this employee through the career. It eliminates the redundancy of multiple orientations, and it stores all the training records in a single centralized database for everyone to use. Also, we offer two solutions for getting the training. You can either seek out Safeland training from one of our third-party providers, or you can send one of your instructors through our Train the Trainer program to teach your own employees. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our training sales department at 888-482-9101. That's 888-482-9101. Or you can email us at trainingsales@veriforce.com.
Welcome to the very first live episode of the Risk Matrix. We're very excited, very, very happy to be here. My name is Paula. I am very fortunate that I get to work with both Dr. Martin and James Junkin on the Risk Matrix, which is, I believe we can all agree, the best podcast in the world. And today we are live. It is our 90th episode, and that's very exciting for us. In this episode, the title is Navigating the Rift, Addressing Issues Between Safety and Procurement Departments. So it's going to be a fascinating episode. We are so glad you're here. A little bit of housekeeping. Just drop your questions over there in the chat, in the Q&A section. We will get to them at the end, about the 30-minute mark. We'll start asking those questions, and our hosts can answer them. So thank you for joining us. And I'm going to do a little intro of our host, which you know and love. Dr. Martin is a 32-year safety veteran and recipient of the prestigious Board of Global EHS Credentialing Impact Award. Dr. Martin brings the gravitas of leadership as past president of the Board of Certified Safety Professionals and is founder of LF Martin Incorporated. James Junkin is ASSP 2024 Safety Professional of the Year for Training and Communications. James has personally trained over 40,000 safety professionals. He is chairman of the board for Veriforce Strategic Advisory Board and CEO of Mariner Gulf Consulting Services, as well as a doctoral candidate and a professor. And so with further ado, off we go. James and Dr. Martin, please.
So let's kick this off. Hello, everybody. This is another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and James Junkin. And we're live today, live with people in the audience, and we're ready to rock and roll. Hi, James.
Hey, good morning. Roll Tide. Look at all these amazing faces we have out here for the first episode of the Risk Matrix Live. Roll Tide, baby.
Roll Tide. We're going to talk about safety and pre-qualification and the intersection of the two today. I hope you guys are ready to discuss this with us and drop some stuff in the chat. But before we get started, a big thank you to our sponsor, Quartix, a trusted leader in vehicle tracking, the #1 vehicle tracking solution for fleets of any size, helping fleet managers and business owners improve visibility, streamline operations, and reduce costs. Monitor vehicle locations in real time, cut fuel costs and wasted time, increase driver productivity and visibility, minimize downtime with maintenance alerts. Quartix, real-time vehicle tracking at www.quartix.com. Hey, James.
Hey, Doc. How's it going?
Let's jump right in here and talk about safety and
procurement.
Procurement.
Wow. This has always been an issue with among safety professionals and frankly among procurement professionals. Both play a critical role in any organization, but particularly hiring clients or large contractors that are using a lot of subcontractors. And so, without safety, we know what we end up with, a lot of serious injuries, fatalities, loss of production time, et cetera. Without procurement doing their function, we don't get qualified contractors in to perform work. So, they're both playing critical roles in maintaining operational efficiency, but many times what I find is there's not a lot of communication between the two groups, the two departments, and that can lead to conflict and miscommunication.
So let's just jump back a little bit, right?
Okay.
The way I kind of want to put a few things in perspective here, right? We've talked before in our podcast about, I think we have anyways, the three-legged stool: safety, productivity, and cost, right? And most people who are probably listening, who don't have a lot of experience with procurement, right? They see procurement as the cost portion of the stool, right? That's
Right.
the one of the three legs, right? But procurement, when we look at this in bigger companies, because maybe in a small company it is just cost, but in a broader sense, in a big company, procurement is a lot of different things, right? And I just kind of want to take a little time to define that before we start talking about how safety goes into that mix, if you'll allow me to do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So procurement, right? They're looking at cost, but their job is to procure services or goods or whatever they're bringing into the company, not only at a good cost, right, but without significant legal complications, without regulatory implications, hopefully taking safety into account, right? Because that goes to the company's their reputation, right? It can go to their environmental liabilities. It can go to so procurement. If procurement's really doing a good job, and this is again just my opinion, right? They're looking at all of these things, not just cost, right? It's not just the cost leg of the stool. Would you agree or disagree, James?
Well, I think that's what they should be looking at. And I think some very mature organizations have the interconnectedness that break down those barriers between procurement and safety and procurement and legal and procurement and operations, to where procurement's the nucleus in which we evaluate contractors and we get the best contractor, maybe not at the best price, but the best contractor for the job. Often what I see is parts of what you're talking about are left out of the bidding process. So maybe it's legal, right? We find somebody with the best price, but we don't find somebody that necessarily has the best background when it comes to injuries, litigation. We don't have hold harmless agreements, indemnification agreements in place as part of the decision-making process. And so as these communication barriers are raised and communication breaks down, you end up with a contractor on the job site that, hey, maybe the best at what they do based on the pricing, but not necessarily the risk, right? We haven't covered our risk basters. Same thing when it comes to safety. We may have a contractor who has a horrible safety record, but has the absolute lowest price. So as a procurement department and safety department and other departments, that communication in the decision tree of deciding on who to put out there on a job really has to come out of a silo and be part of a comprehensive safety management system, procurement management system, organizational management system, if you want to, so that everyone who has responsibilities in the areas has a say toward this contractor or this vendor selection, right? And so I think sometimes what we get is in siloed, sometimes even our software siloed. So you've got procurement software where we're talking about bids and we're talking about contracts. Did they sign all this? And that doesn't always communicate with our safety pre-qualification system. So good in one does not necessarily mean good in others. And we're all got these different priorities and objectives when it comes to contractor management, contractor selection.
So I'm gonna try to sum that up a little bit. So I see procurement as a solution. Procurement is a solution, right, and a team sport. I'm just not when I'm talking about safety and inputting safety as a decision-making process into that team, right? I have to speak to procurement in a language that they can understand, right? And sometimes safety is kind of to them is like, well, what does that mean to me? Well, what does it mean? It means legal, regulatory, environmental, company reputation, et cetera, like that. So, when we're talking about bringing people to the table, right? It's not just us. It's not just the safety people. It's the financial people. It's the legal department. It's the environmental people. It could be the foreman that have to do the work, and they have to have productivity, right? So while as a safety professional, I'd always like my voice to be the loudest, which in a lot of cases, my voice is pretty much the loudest.
You're pretty
anyway.
loud. You're pretty loud.
I would like it to be the loudest, but I have to take the kind of the cog approach. We're all cogs in that procurement solution, right? The solution is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a lot of it just depends.
I agree with that. And I think it really comes down to, if you're going to break down these barriers, is appreciating the perspective of others, right? So as a safety professional, I need to acknowledge that my procurement team may not, they may not possess the needed knowledge necessary for the necessary safety regulations that are involved. They're not safety experts. That's what we do. And we may not fully appreciate as safety professionals all that goes into selecting a vendor. That vendor might be the only person or the only group in this particular region that performs that necessary service that we have to have. And so when we're drawing lines in the ground, particularly on the safety side, is saying, well, they don't have this policy, they don't have this procedure, they don't have this training, therefore you need to, I'm not approving and signing off on this vendor. I don't know that that's a team approach. I'm not necessarily saying put unsafe vendors and contractors in positions where they can get people hurt, but I do think you need to appreciate the other person's perspective. It's part of a total risk management philosophy for an organization, right? How much risk are we willing to take? What is an acceptable risk? And we just had an episode talking about acceptable risk within organizations. I can tell you where I've seen this fail. I remember several years ago, there was an oil company that reached out to me and said, hey, we need some help because we have all this software, right? And we have all these silos, and we're not communicating inside the organization. And so we've got procurement has selected a vendor. They're out on site, but we don't have insurance verification. They don't have insurance. We found out they didn't have insurance. And how did we find out they didn't have insurance? Is we had an incident, then we got sued, and no one in safety had signed off on this because they were a bad score in our third-party verification system using Veriforce, but they were good in the procurement system. So operating in all these silos is how you end up with a bunch of finger pointing that of whose responsibility it was. So managing vendor relationships for a procurement department, I can appreciate how hard that is, but I'm not just safety professional. I'm a business owner that has to use vendors, right?
That's right. That's right. So I'll make an analogy here, and I like to use HAZOP as an analogy in a lot of our discussions, right? But in a HAZOP situation where we're looking at each piece of a system, whatever system it may be, maybe it's a piping system or a remediation system or whatever. We sit down at the table with a bunch of people and we decide as a group, if we turn this valve or this valve doesn't have a certain thing on it, what's the risk? Can we accept the risk? Can we not accept the risk? And I think that that's a similar conversation that this team, right? Or if you're going to use software as a solution, that all needs to feed in and not have one portion of the system making a bigger impact on that decision, if that makes sense. Okay. So how do you do that? Right. I mean, that's the $1 million question is how do you get what you need for safety as a safety director, safety professional into the procurement discussion and into the procurement decision. And I think one way that you and I have both seen our clients and people do this is they will create at least a floor, a minimum, right, of what they can accept. And that's with input from a bunch of different parties. But, an example, one of your clients, James, has special safety conditions. And they're the floor, right? And those things are you can go this far, but no farther than this. And then everything else is a discussion on top of that. But at least that's where safety stands
and let me say that about that special client. They have special safety conditions, but those conditions were not made in a vacuum by the safety department. It was a collaborative effort with the category managers, particularly the procurement managers, the site managers. Everybody had an input into deciding what is the minimum that we're going to accept. Legal had an opportunity. So really, what's that about? That is about a communications plan. It wasn't ad hoc. We planned it out. We got everybody's input. And ultimately, there was a decision maker that said, okay, this is what we're going to go with. I think one of the biggest challenges of today is communication. We have all these communication devices. I mean, look, we've got 52 people who have signed in to watch us live today. I don't know that I ever envisioned that when I first got into safety or first became part of a management team in an oil company 30 years ago. If we had a conference call, we thought that was cool. Right? But now we're able to meet not only here, but all over the world. We're meeting, but here's my question. Are we communicating? Are we communicating? I think communication has gotten worse over the years and not necessarily better, right? So are we meeting or are we communicating? So my point with this in developing a comprehensive plan with procurement is, hey, we need to have regular meetings that have open lines of communication between the safety department and the procurement partner and the legal department and all the other, perhaps even HR stakeholders, and insist that all share their insights and updates so that we are making sure that we have set whatever our criteria is going to be for vendor selection in a manner that meets everybody's needs and also has a mechanism for exceptions, because exceptions are going to come up. Variances are going to come up, right? I see it all the time. And ignoring this really creates unrealized risk within your system. I can think off the top of my head of 5 major instances involving hiring clients and contractors where they were missing some type of indemnification or hold harmless agreement. They were missing some parts of their pre-qualification. They have answered honestly and said they're not doing these things that are essential in pre-qualification, but no one either caught it or it was overruled, it was ignored. And next thing you know, we've got somebody seriously injured on site. In a couple of those cases, they were fatalities. And that all got exposed at the depositions, right? And that is the worst place for you to lay bare your inability to communicate with your counterpart, because it comes so obvious when those systems fail. So it's really about interconnectedness, enhancing communication, and not just meeting, but actually communicating. I think that's one of the solutions.
So that's all well and good, right? But we need to put some structure around that meeting, right? So when you talk about meeting together with all these people, we all know how kind of meetings can go off the rails. So the suggestion is to have an agenda, right? And the agenda should include a discussion of, again, where are we at? Where is everybody's bare minimum? What contractors are we looking at to procure, right? Are there exceptions in the system? Something like that so that we can keep everybody on track, right? Because I think the inability to communicate sometimes stems from the fact that, people who squawk the loudest get the most amount of time in a meeting, or,
No,
yeah. And,
I'm that guy.
well, maybe. So I guess where I'm going with that is, I agree with you that communication is a problem, and to stop that in its tracks, you have to have somebody who can manage the meeting and address the meeting, and there have to be some leadership qualities that go on with putting together an agenda and keeping people on task. Because the last thing you want to do is have a bunch of meetings, a bunch of people that have a common thing that they're there to talk about, and then they do everything to talk about that one thing, which
Right.
is how do we minimize risk in the supply chain?
Well,
How do
let me
we
say
minimize
this.
risk in the supply
This
chain?
doesn't, this is, to me, this is a philosophy that is broader than just safety and procurement, legal, HR, all these other stakeholders. This applies in general to business as a whole. I hate meetings. Okay. In order to have a meeting at Mariner Gulf that I'm going to be a part of, it needs to have an agenda, it needs to have a question, and we have to be able to make a decision. We're going to make a decision in that meeting. If not, that's an email. Okay. We're not going to tie up a bunch of people's time for 30 minutes or an hour over a Zoom call to just talk. Right. So enhanced communication, I think, follows exactly what you're talking about, whether it's procurement, safety, or whatever. If you want to get more productivity out of your meetings, meetings need to have an agenda. You need to stay focused on the agenda. They need to have a question, and a decision needs to be made. If we're not making decisions, I don't need to come to that meeting, right? You can send me an email and tell about it. Now, another one, kind of looking at the clock here, I think where things fail is there's not a training program to support procurement or safety that crosses into each other's realms. Meaning, you may have a training program for procurement that teaches them, okay, these are our procurement guidelines, these are our guidelines when it comes to accepting gifts, and this is your approval minimums, etc. Okay, that's great. But it might also be good for procurement professionals to learn a little bit about the safety aspects related to risk. We don't need to turn them into a safety professional. And vice versa is also true. What do you think about that?
So I was going to go there, and I mean, again, I know you keep mentioning safety, and that's really kind of where you and I lie. But everybody needs to understand everybody else's role and their skin in the game, right? And one way to do that is to have some sort of onboarding program for new people that teaches them a little bit about what skin is in the game for each department, right? I know from a procurement perspective, I'm not a procurement person, but I'm pretty sure that if there are some procurement people on the line here, they probably are saying, okay, tell me what's important to you, right? And what's important to, Mariner Gulf's procurement versus, a company I may work for, their procurement department may be different, or their safety
Absolutely.
goals may be different. And I'll use the example here. There are a lot of people who are procuring subs who aren't that big that they have a legal department. They may have a safety director, but they don't have a legal department. They don't have an environmental. They don't have marketing. They don't have all those things. All of that sits with the owner, right? Or
Right.
or a few of the key stakeholders. So in that respect, the key stakeholders have to sit down and they have to understand basically what are the snakes that can bite you. And then we all can have an educated discussion on, you know, which snakes can we still have in the arena while we're fighting, and which really need to go.
Again, that's that as low as reasonably practical, right? And that's going to change for each organization. I think really what you're talking about is how an organization is organized. The larger the organization, the more opportunities there is for collaboration, but there are also more opportunities for failures in communication, right? And you see that in large organizations all the time. The smaller the organization, the less resources that you have, but the ability to consolidate decision making, right? So if I'm in a bigger organization, I want to make sure that I've got some sort of maybe embedded might be a bad word. A cross-functional team might be a better word, but sending people from safety over to procurement to learn what it is that they do, sending people from procurement over to safety to learn what it is what they do as a function of managing the risks to the organization. You know, the only time this is going to come up is after we've killed someone, we've injured someone, we've damaged the environment, or we've torn up our asset, right? As long as work is getting done and getting done safely and we're not having any of these issues, then everything's run along just fine. But accidents don't announce themselves that next 2:30 we're going to kill one of our workers, right? Mm-hmm. So
and
each side appreciating.
So let's, I mean, the repercussions are big, right? We're not just talking about the fatality and the reputation. We're talking lost time. We're talking, you know, a lot of different things, legal implications, being sued, you know, so safety has a stake in all those other departments. And that's how you describe what you're doing, right? I'm trying to not get us sued. I'm trying to save us time, hopefully costs, reputational damage. Certainly loss of life is bad no matter how you look at it, right? So nobody wants that. That's the articulation right there, is how does what my concerns have to do, what do they have to do with what may affect you, right? How's it going to make your job harder if something goes wrong, and I don't set the floor for safety correctly?
I agree with that, but I also think as safety professionals, we have to acknowledge you cannot reduce risk to zero. We have to use suppliers and vendors. Maybe we ourselves are a supplier and vendor. I know several of my clients wear both hats. You know, they're a supplier and vendor to one organization, then they have subcontractors that work underneath them, and they have procurement that are selecting these subcontractors, right? We cannot reduce risk to zero, but a collaborative effort needs to be in determining who these suppliers and vendors are, right? And so my message to our listeners is, if you're not having some sort of collaborative effort in vendor selection or supplier selection, then you probably have gaps and unrealized risk in your supply chain, right? Or in your contractor network or in your subcontractor network. So whatever method works for you in your organizational culture that breaks down these barriers, have engagement in the procurement process, in the vendor selection process. And of course, Veriforce offers numbers of tools necessary to help you discern the data to get to a point where you've realized whatever the acceptable risk is, right?
Yeah. So let me sum that up for people listening, right? What James just said is, if you want to be heard, you need to stop having that love affair with zero, right? Because the love affair with zero is gonna bite you when you try to talk to other people about your concerns, right? If you all you can do is stand on zero and say that that's feasible. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Nobody's going to listen to you. Just like nobody's going to listen to somebody in the legal department that says we're just never going to we're never going to do any work at all because legally we might get sued. Right. That's a love affair with zero. So quit your love affair with zero and start coming to those communicative, collaborative sessions and come with an open mind for where can I give a little to get a little, right? And I think that'll be appreciated, whether it's from the procurement side or the other sides of departments in the house. You'll be appreciated if you've got a sound, level-headed approach to, my way. It's not always my way or the highway. So
and
James,
second to that, let me say this and I'll close it out. Second to that, and I agree, this love affair with zero is an uncompromising position that ignores reality. But if you are coming to procurement and saying, I believe this vendor is exceeding our level of risk, come with the reasons why, and also come with some recommendations to get them out of the risk category where they're into something we can live with. So if their workers are not trained, come with a recommendation to help them train their workers. Maybe it's a third-party vendor or whatever. If they don't have the right policies and procedures, come with a recommendation to help them get their right policies and procedures, right? So, and legal will have a lot to say about that, and we're kind of short on time. But nobody likes someone that just shows up with problems without solutions. Be a safety
Amen.
Professional with solutions.
Amen.
All right.
So I was going to suggest let's take it to the chat. I'm wondering if we have any questions you want to throw at us, Paula.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do. Our first question that came up was, how have you seen profit prioritized over safety?
I can name one right now. I have a client that does large public sector jobs, and it's always on the low bid, right? Low bid wins. And what do we get with low bid, James? A lot of times.
Yeah. High risk.
High risk. And they might be low bid because they're trying to get profit by not having safety or not having some of those other things in place, right? So I've seen that happen. I don't know, James, do you have an example?
I'll say this. Profit is good and more profit is better. James is in the profit business.
We're in the business of business.
Every company out here is in the profit business. And if we don't make a profit, we're going to go out of business. Now, having said that, the best way to erase profits is get somebody seriously injured, killed, get involved in complex litigation. Those profits will disappear. Why? Increased insurance premiums, settlements, things of that nature. But the greatest threat to your profitability is losing your customer base because you got your clients involved in litigation, right?
True.
So when we're talking about profitability, hey, well, we can take this risk here and cut this safety there, and we can do those things. And maybe you get by with it now, maybe you've got it by with it for the last 10 years or 50 years, but sooner or later, if something bad happens, you're putting at risk the financial viability of your organization long term.
True.
Pay me now, pay me later. Right? So that's my thing about profits over safety.
Got another one for us, Paula?
Absolutely. We have, what is the liability exposure as a whole if the company exposed to should a problem occur during the job? What is the worst that can happen? I know it depends, but what if?
So whoever asked this question is trying to shut me down before I even start, right? Because we all know everything. It just depends, right? So give us the question again. That's kind of a long one. If you don't mind, Paula.
Sure, absolutely. What is the liability exposure as a whole if the company exposed to should a problem occur during the job. What is the worst that can happen?
Okay.
Okay, that's very broad, right? I think, all the things that James and I have been talking about, you want to define the risks ahead of time as best you can, right? So that when these unforeseen things don't happen. I guess the worst that can occur for safety is a fatality, right? Or serious injury. The worst that can occur for legal is to get sued or to run afoul of regulations. I mean, I'm sorry, whoever asked this question, but it does just depend
Let me
on
throw
your risk.
something in there for consideration here. Here's some, maybe I understand the question. All right, here's the worst thing that can happen. As results to the business, not results to the employee. Worst thing that happened to the employee is to be killed or be seriously injured. Let's set that aside for a second. Legal liability comes in the situation where we're talking about having to make someone whole for the damages that were incurred by you onto them, whether they're an organization or they're a person. Damages are listed in both compensatory, which means I need to make you whole, and in some cases, punitive, right? Now, in the large places where we practice, punitive damages can be capped at 3 times the compensatory damage rate. So if you're going to award someone $1 million for an injury or whatever, and the jury wants to come back with punitive damages, that could be 3 times as much in states that have what they call tort reform. In other states, that doesn't apply. There is no cap on punitive damages. I remember one in Alabama years ago, a person got burned and the compensatory damages were $1,500 and the punitive damages was $150 million. So from a financial standpoint, insurance does not pay for punitive damages. So to answer your question, it really comes down to determining negligence, whether you were negligent or were you grossly negligent, right? And so we could do a whole show on negligence by itself.
James, that was a really roundabout way to say it just depends.
Hey man, roll tide.
Excellent. Okay, next question from Don Kramer is, smaller projects typically do not allow for proper vetting of contractors beyond the basic eligibility requirements. It's my belief that it is a focus rooted in the realm of operations and cost. Safety is often an afterthought. How can one close or bridge those gaps?
I mean, you're talking about a smaller company, right? Again, I think in a lot of small companies, when you're like the big cheese, the safety person in amongst the operations and other professionals, you start to get this kind of the attitude of I want to do the best job I can, which we all want to do, right? But love affair with zero comes in, and what we need to do is approach people with their concerns in mind, right? I know that your idea of getting these people vetted comes down to productivity and cost, but you might want to consider this, because if this happens, then we lose money this way, right? And this comes down to the real cost of safety, right? What does it cost, indirect or direct costs, if somebody gets hurt or if we don't do our due diligence, right? What is the true cost? And if you can communicate that, right, that's the $100 million question. Then you're going to be successful with the product, the production and operations people, I think.
And I would say this: when you're a small contractor, small hiring client, small jobs, I mean, you see it all the time. They're plumbers, they're electricians, they're working in the houses, they're working in small commercial settings, right? They don't have as elaborate safety management system as, say, one of their counterparts that may be working in a refinery, because the safety requirements for just entry into the refinery and the procurement process and pre-qualification
Crazy.
is so robust. So what would I say if I was a safety professional in a small company working with maybe the procurement team, which is most likely the owner, and we're hiring these subcontractors? Decide what matters. What is the stuff that's going to get you jammed up with OSHA and the stuff that's going to get you jammed up from a legal situation or a serious injury and fatality? So the sticky, right? Focus on the stuff that will kill you. And that's where you begin in the contractor evaluation process. So if we're going to have 25 people working at heights, man, OSHA going to get mad at me for saying this, but I'm not focused on access to medical records, right? I want to know, do these cats have any experience working at heights? Are they trained at working at heights? Are there some jobs they can call me they worked on at heights and I can get some past references? That's the down and dirty.
So you know what I'm a fan of, James, is people are starting to job titles in our field, advisors, right? And if you take an advisory role as opposed to an authoritarian role where you know all and what you're saying is the truth, you're not going to be heard as well as if you're an advisor to the people who are making the decisions, right? So if you know what matters to them, then you can speak to what might hurt those bottom lines or the profit margins or things of that nature.
Okay. What you got, Paula?
Sure. Andy is asking, would you trust AI to make safety calls on your site?
No, not yet. Not at this point. Not yet. And I'm going to tell you, your lawyers aren't going to want you to do that just yet anyway. You know, you need sufficient data. So when I come and say part of my job is to anticipate reasonable, foreseeable, and predictable hazards and put appropriate controls in place, I don't get to say, well, you know what, my AI just didn't work, right? I don't think we're there yet, but soon. And I think you'll see a lot of court cases that are going to test this opinion of James's. And as that works through the court system, pay particular attention. You'll see it pop up on LinkedIn as some of these landmark cases about the use of AI in identifying hazards, identifying at-risk behaviors. We did an episode on this. You just have to look back. I don't know which ones it was, but me and Dr. Martin previously talked about privacy concerns with AI. There are not a lot of barriers around AI. One of our strategic advisory board members, Dr. Alan Rice, came on, and he gave a great presentation on that. So if you go back, look back at that episode, Dr. Alan Rice about AI, and we talk about this for about an hour.
Yeah. Remember, I mean, you know, I've always heard the saying garbage in, garbage out, right? And until we're fully comfortable of what we're feeding these AI systems, these AI minds, and ensuring that there isn't garbage going in that's going to pollute the streams of thinking here. I think it's a not very strategic decision to go and have AI make your decisions for you. You can have it help, right? But don't do what James says and say, well, my AI picked XYZ company and it's AI's fault, because nobody's going to buy that at this stage in the game.
You will not transfer liability to the AI.
To the AI. That's right. He's not going to jail. They're not going to jail.
Okay. Bill has a question. When a safety box is checked, what does the check mark really track to? The standard, for example.
Well, it's either going to track to a standard or to a policy and procedure, right? So I'm a big policy, procedure, systems guy. Now, and I got this from my time when I worked at Mercedes-Benz, and they said, you got to make it about the process and not about the people. And what I was doing was, when the people were short or they weren't actually doing what we needed to do, I'd shortcut the process, go around the people to keep the line running, keep building cars. And I thought this was great. You know, I was going to be greeted as a hero. Hey, despite the dysfunctions of this team, we worked around it and we won the game. But that was not what my CEO wanted. He said, James, we have to see if the process fails, right? So we can improve the process. Make it about the process, not about the people. I said, Bill, don't we want to hire good people? He said, yeah, we do. But if the process is in their head and not on the paper, when they leave this organization, our process leaves this organization. You want to know why we have so many people hurt across all these industries as we're having these generational changes? Because the process is sitting at the house watching TV and the Weather Channel and Netflix all day. We didn't put it on paper. So if you're going to have a checkbox on something, it needs to tie back to a process.
So I'm not a fan of the checkbox system, right? I know we have to use checkboxes to say if we're looking at a system, what parts of the system are there, and there's a greater probability if we check all the boxes that the big checkbox of safety for procurement is available. I like the idea of a sliding scale, right? Which brings in this, you know, in the future, we're going to have maybe AI helping us make real-time decisions, right? So you're not really checking a box as much as you're watching the barometer of how a company is doing over time, or if it's a large scale projects, it's 5, 6, 10 years, right? And you've procured them in the beginning. Where are they on that barometer of the sliding scale? And maybe that you need to make a switch or a change, right? So ideally, I know we all use check boxes, right? But ideally, that safety barometer of where a company is slides up and down, right? And it just depends.
Okay. What about how do you see stress and low morale affecting safety on teams, and what do you do about it?
James.
Look,
James creates stress, so I'm not
create
sure.
Stress, and I want to talk about this as probably one of the most talked about topics in safety right now. Just came back from Safety on the Edge, where I spoke. Dr. Daniels, part of our strategic advisory board here at Veriforce, also spoke. A guest we've had speak at Veriforce events and on our podcast, Georgia Bryce Hutchinson, spoke, and she is a mental health practitioner. She is a licensed mental health expert. And just about every speaker at that event, including those two, Dr. Daniels with psychological safety and Georgia, all had an aspect of mental health or psychological safety in their presentations, including myself. So how does it affect? It affects everything. And it's not just stress at work, it's stress at home. We live very stressful lives. You see this in the rise of violence around road rage and things of that nature. So it affects. We all understand it affects. The real question is, how do we deal with it? And I thought Georgia Bryce Hutchinson came out with some of the best advice, which is stop trying to turn safety professionals and frontline supervisors into therapists and counselors. That's not our job. That's outside our realm of expertise. Educate your team on the warning signs and then have resources necessary to get people help. The larger the company, the more available resources are. I know all of you came out with go back a few years, remember the employee assistance programs, which were primarily for drugs and alcohol, right? Those programs have expanded into counseling and et cetera. So yeah, look, we all have stress. We all have challenges sometimes with our mental health. We need to be able to recognize those that are at most risk. And that's where I think HR needs to get involved, right? I'm not a therapist. Yeah. It just depends.
No, so I'm gonna add to that, James. I think you're right. Yeah, we're not mental health professionals or counselors or whatever, right? But we can be educated with the warning signs and how to not stress others out, right? And I think we have to couple some of that with and this is just from my perspective as a safety professional or somebody who's going on site to steward safety, is that I do need to be a good steward of the environment that we work in, right? And, we all talk about the safety cops, right? The people who come out and all they do is spout what they know and what should be done and whatever, without really connecting with each other and connecting with the people. And I think, this goes back to, if you're going to be a good steward, you're not out there to stress people out. You're there to help them do their job better or more efficiently or without stress, right? And so if we all approach it that way, we're not a mental health professional, but we're at least being a good steward for the people around us.
Right. So we have two different questions, one from Caleb and one from Jack, which kind of combine. Such a great conversation, big thinking leadership that us younger folks aren't always exposed to. Thank you. So I thought maybe you guys could talk a little bit about the mentor-mentee thing that we've talked about in the past, combined with Jack's question of great lunch and learn opportunity. I really enjoyed this. Will there be more of these in the future?
That's a good question. Yes. We're going to try to be live, I think, every single episode from here on out, if possible. There might be sometimes when we can't be, but for the most part, if people like these and they like hearing from us, straight up being able to interact, we're in it to win it. James, you can chime in on that if you like.
We're planning for the foreseeable future every Tuesday, 11 to 12 Central. We will be broadcasting live, but we're also recording these episodes. So you can still find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Veriforce's YouTube channel, posted on LinkedIn. That's where you can access the recordings and our library. But this is something new. If you like it, we like it, right? And we'll definitely be doing this again next Tuesday. And by way of announcement, we'll have Quartix, who's a sponsor. Sean Mayer will be representing that organization. We'll be talking about driving safety and telematics and the latest technology in vehicle management, and that will be next Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, maybe too, Paula, I think, you asked about mentor-mentee relationships and kind of how this goes with James and I. James and I get a lot of reach outs from people. I know we've talked about this. It's not enough time in the day. But if you're smart about this, you will find us here every week, right? And maybe, James, one of the things that we should think about, and we can table this for discussion for later, is to have some straight up risk matrix live mentoring sections. Come in with your questions, and we won't have a topic. We'll just, stump the chump. And it comes from Car Talk. I took that from.
Hey, look, I'm willing to do that, but I'm not answering any IH questions. You're the IH. I don't know how many air transfers needs to happen. I don't know.
I don't either. Here's the thing. Everybody needs a calculator once in a while. So,
absolutely.
Hopefully that answered your question, Paula. But we're in it to win it. We like this interaction. I do, at least. I like hearing the questions from the audience. And if you don't like what we say, or if you disagree with us, you're welcome to clap back there in the chat, and tell us what you don't disagree with, and we'll argue with you. And we'll probably just end up on "it just depends," or something about some lethal brew and the final garnish on something from James. So
it's so profound she doesn't remember. I see where I am.
There you go. You can go ahead and tell them what that quote is, but mine is just very simple. It just depends.
Just depends.
And I can argue whatever side of the equation you want me to argue. So thanks again for listening to us here on the Risk Matrix. As James said, we are taped. We're taping today, and this is going to go up on our Veriforce YouTube channel. It's going to go up on Spotify. It's going to go up on Apple Podcasts, pretty much everywhere where you can get your podcasts. You can like, subscribe. put some stuff in the comments. If you want to come on here and be a guest, reach out to us because we are looking for guests to come on and join the discussion. James, you want to take us out?
Hey, thank you for all of you who attended and supported this podcast. Today is our 90th episode. 90th episode. We're coming up on 100 episodes, and we're going to do something special for that 100th episode, and we look forward to announcing that pretty soon. We do this for you, and we hope that you enjoy it. We thank you for your support, and most of all, we thank you for the 50 plus people that decided to attend with us live today. We're a little nervous about that going live, but I think it's been a success, mostly due to y'all and Dr. Martin. Great questions. Thank you again. Until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs, and roll tide.